Today, we are diving deep into the world of addiction, but we're going way beyond just talking about behaviors. We're going to ask a really important question. Why isn't just stopping or using willpower enough for so many people to find lasting freedom? There's a much deeper human story here, and that's what we're going to get into.
You know, this quote really nails it right from the start. It frames addiction not just as a bad habit, but as a powerful relationship. A relationship with an experience. It's about that promise that something can reliably change the way you feel, offering an escape, a comfort, or a high. So the key isn't just the action itself, it's the feeling that action delivers.
Okay, so to get started, let's look at the way most of us understand addiction today, which really focuses on the science and what's happening inside our brains. So, from a clinical perspective, addiction is basically an excessive reliance on something. And it has three main hallmarks. First, there's escalation. You need more and more over time to get the same effect. Then comes compulsion, which is just a loss of control. You can't stop even when you want to. And finally, relapse, which is going back to it even when you know all the negative consequences.
What's so fascinating is how much our view of this has changed. I mean, for a very long time, addiction was just seen as a moral failing, a weakness of character. But science has completely turned that idea on its head. We now understand it as a chronic illness, a lot like diabetes or asthma, that's marked by actual, measurable changes in the brain that mess with our ability to make choices. But, and this is a big but, this brain-centric model, as true and important as it is, doesn't always seem to tell the whole story. There's another layer we need to peel back.
And that leads us to this massive question, right? If it's just a disease of the brain, why do so many people who get medical treatment still end up relapsing? It really suggests that just using willpower or focusing only on the physical side of things is missing a huge piece of the puzzle. So, what else could possibly be going on?
And here's a huge clue. The idea here is that addictive behaviors are often just the symptoms of something much, much deeper. They're tangled up in the basic struggles, the desires, and the emotions that make us all human. In other words, the addiction isn't the real problem. It's an attempt to solve another problem.
This brings us to a really powerful and I think more complete way of looking at things. Viewing addiction not just as a compulsion, but as a desperate search for safety, for comfort, for refuge.
When you dig down to the absolute core of this search, you almost always find one thing: suffering. Some experts even call addiction a self-regulation disorder, which is really just a clinical way of saying it's a coping strategy, a way to self-medicate really painful emotional states.
And these are the kinds of things that drive that search. We're talking about deep, profound emotional pain, things like shame, loneliness, trauma, or even what's called a disordered desire, which is wanting a good thing but in the wrong way or for the wrong reasons. When we're faced with that kind of pain, our natural instinct is to find a safe haven, to find some kind of comfort.
And this right here illustrates the cruel trap of it all. The addiction becomes what you could call a counterfeit refuge. It promises safety, it promises relief, but it's a promise it just can't keep. It gives you a brief moment of peace, sure, but in the end, it only leads to deeper and deeper bondage.
Now, if we want to go even deeper, some frameworks, especially those that are faith-based, describe addiction not just as a search for refuge, but as a problem of the heart's ultimate priority. From this point of view, addiction is fundamentally a spiritual problem. It's seen as a form of misplaced worship, or idolatry, where something that was created, whether it's a substance, an experience, or even a feeling, gets elevated to the place of a savior. It literally becomes a god of choice that a person serves to try and find satisfaction. So as you can see, these two very different ways of understanding addiction, as a brain disease on one hand versus a disorder of the heart on the other, they naturally lead to different, though sometimes overlapping paths toward healing and restoration. So let's just break this down side by side. The medical model says the problem is a chronic brain disease, it's driven by compulsion and cravings, and so healing is all about managing behavior. But the heart model says the problem is a spiritual and relational disorder. It's driven by suffering. And so healing has to focus on restoring connection and getting to the root of why that false refuge was so appealing in the first place. And for a lot of faith-based approaches, this is the anchor of their hope. The idea is that the deep, deep longing that addiction tries so desperately to fill can only be truly satisfied by something much greater. In this worldview, that ultimate satisfaction comes from a connection to God, who is presented as the ultimate true refuge.
And that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question that kind of sums up this whole shift in thinking we've been exploring. What if the goal isn't just to stop doing something? What if the opposite of addiction isn't just being sober? Maybe true recovery is about a much deeper journey of healing the heart, of confronting our suffering, and of finally finding a true place of connection, purpose, and safety